and I am Soini Gray. Former Brazilian President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva has been registered as a presidential candidate in Brasilia. It's a crucial day for the Brazilian left. The people registered Lula in a massive demonstration with thousands of participants from all over the country in a historic event that included former President Dilma Rousseff. The march went through various parts of the city and arrived to the Supreme Electoral Court for the registration process. Lula is currently leading the polls, but doubts remain as to whether he can run. He is serving a 12-year prison sentence for alleged corruption and money laundering. Supporters say his imprisonment is an attempt to prevent him from running for office. The Supreme Electoral Court now has to decide if it will allow him to register as a candidate.
A river of support for Lula. Thousands of followers of the former president marched to Brasilia on Wednesday to witness his registration as the official presidential candidate for the Workers' Party. Some of them even walked for days, marching for the candidate, whom they believe will restore stability in Brazil.
We came here to go to the court to register Lula's candidacy, and we're not leaving until that is done.
We have the hope and certainty that only Lula will be able to lead the Brazilian people to be victorious in the elections, to take possession of the presidency and to reorganize Brazil, starting in 2019.
Lula da Silva is still serving a 12-year jail sentence in Curitiba, so it was up to his vice-presidential pick, Fernando Haddad, to take lead as he confirmed Lula's official registration.
I am certain that this gesture expresses the wishes of millions of Brazilians who want to bring Lula back to the Planalto Palace. He represents the hopes, dreams, and wishes for a better future, and has all the attributes to lead Brazil out of this crisis that was imposed on us.
On the streets and online, the hashtag #LulaIsCandidate was trending on Twitter all day. Lula is by far the most popular candidate, according to the latest polls, but the real fight starts now. The Electoral Court is expected to reject Lula's registration as a presidential candidate. The known as Ficha Limpa law says persons sentenced after an appeal cannot run for presidency. And the newly elected president of the Electoral Court, Rosa Weber, has been a hard defender of that law. Lula's lawyers are expected to continue to appeal on his sentence until the last minute. If they manage to do so until September 17th, Lula's face and name will be on the ballot, but the real candidate will be Fernando Haddad. Only one question remains: will Lula be allowed to run? Well, it's unlikely that the Electoral Court will allow it, so Lula's best chance is to be acquitted of all of his crimes. Time is against him, but if he managed to do that before the elections, what we saw today, all of the support and the polls suggest that he will be again the president of Brazil. Mia Alberti, Telesur, in São Paulo.
We're being joined now live by phone by the freelance journalist Mike Fox, who has been at today's protest to discuss the situation the former president finds himself in. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Lula has doubled the supporters of his nearest rival, Jair Bolsonaro, and thousands have rallied today for his candidacy. You're there on the ground. How's the energy and what are people saying?
Well, obviously, Lula supporters we're really excited about today. I mean, this is the 6th day that the MST has marched. They began a march 6 days ago into Brasilia. They arrived yesterday. Thousands of landless workers were camped out overnight in the city's main stadium, and then they marched from there down to the Supreme Electoral Court, just this afternoon. They were joined by other social movements and Workers' Party members and a lot of different groups on the left. And they all said that this is really exciting because it's the first time there's been a mass mobilization like this for the registration of a candidate. Inside the building, the Supreme Electoral Court, Dilma, former President Dilma, went inside together with Fernando Haddad, which is candidate. He's the former mayor of Sao Paulo, Workers' Party, and it was really a celebration. It was really a celebration. You know, there were some concerns because the National Guard had been authorized by the government to kind of meet the protesters, but they hung on the side, and there were no cases of, no incidents and things like that. So for the left, for Lula supporters, this was a really, really exciting day, and it kicks off the campaigns, which begin tomorrow.
So we know that he's been registered, but what does that mean exactly, Mike?
Good question. So it means that his candidacy is registered, and he is now on the ticket for the elections. Now the thing is the Supreme Electoral Court will look at everyone who has registered in the next few weeks, and they're going to have to make a decision on whether or not they are barred from actually participating in the election. So what we're expecting is that the Supreme Electoral Court is going to make a decision on Lula in early September, the first or second week in September, and then we'll have an idea about kind of where he stands. Most people think it's not very likely that he is actually going to be able to run. That would mean that Fernando Haddad would move up to the presidential candidacy for the Workers' Party, and that Manuela Davila, who used to be the presidential candidate for the Communist Party, would move into the vice presidential candidacy. Now that's an interesting position. She's 36. She's very young. She's very leftist activist. She was on the stage with Lula the day he took the stage right before he turned himself in Sao Paulo, and so that's going to be really interesting to see, kind of the next steps. If that happens, of course, we won't know until the first or second week in September when the Supreme Electoral Court makes their decision.
So, Mike, I'm going to ask you for a bit of prediction here, or your personal thoughts here. We're in a tricky legal situation. Do you think that despite this, Lula's name will be added to the final ballot? And what do you think is going to happen? Do you think Brazilians will be able to vote for him come October? And if that doesn't happen, what will happen if his name is unfortunately not added to the ballot?
Exactly. So that is the question. And in Brazilian politics, it's anyone's guess. So this is my take on it, and we're going to see how this plays out. I don't think he's going to be able to actually to run in the October 7th elections. I think it's going to go to Haddad and Manuel Davila. What that is going to mean is hard to say. The polls have been very complicated. So up until now, obviously, we know that Jair Bolsonaro, who is the far-right candidate, Trump-like candidate, who's come out with, racist, homophobic comments and used to be a captain in the Brazilian military under the dictatorship, he's running in second after Lula, and he has just like Trump, he has a very, very strong support network. Now, after him, there are several other candidates, and then there's, of course, the PSDB, which is the staunch enemies of the Workers' Party. Alckmin is their presidential candidate. He's the former governor of Sao Paulo. Now, exactly what's going to happen, it completely remains to be seen. I've been talking with people that think that Lula's support is going to be just completely transferred onto Haddad, and actually, I've seen some reason to believe that even if Lula isn't able to win, Haddad is still going to be able to do well in the elections. But whenever Haddad's name is included in the latest polls, it's way far down because people aren't even thinking about him right now. They're thinking about Lula. So there's it's really hard to say what this looks like. Now, I could imagine a case where the Workers' Party, Haddad and Manuela Davila, get into the second round with either Alckmin or Bolsonaro, most likely Bolsonaro, and then they have to compete in the end of October. The other one, which is a worst case scenario, shows Alckmin from the PSDB, also right wing, competing against Bolsonaro, and then you have a situation like you had in France, where it's Macron versus Le Pen, and then the left has to decide if they're willing to, if they're going to vote against Le Pen because they just don't want, Bolsonaro to get into power. Of course, like many people, are hoping that's not the case. And I think the most important thing right now is that the PT and the Workers' Party and Lula supporters aren't even thinking about what happens, if that happens. What they're thinking about right now is the fact that Lula has been registered and he is their man. And then they're going to take things one day at a time and see what happens in September. But in the meantime, they're building up that support for Lula, and we're going to see where this goes.
Thanks so much, Mike Fox, for chatting with us and actually breaking down this very complicated situation. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Other news now, Mario Abdo Benitez has taken the oath of office to become the new president of Paraguay in a ceremony in Asunción. Former President Horacio Cartes prepared for the power handover by taking off his presidential sash and handing over his wooden staff. The new president has announced he will name his half-brother and former Central Bank board member Benigno Lopez as finance minister. In his inauguration speech, Abdo Benitez made a call for unity.
Mario Abdo Benitez has been sworn in as president. His father was the secretary of dictator Alberto Stroessner for over 30 years. Benitez comes from the Colorado Party, which is also the party of former president Horacio Cartes. The presidential inauguration ceremony took place during protests where social movements marched across the capital city, demanding to keep the nation's sovereignty safe after an agreement between Paraguay and the government of Mauricio Macri was signed. Abdo Benitez, who has been linked with political figures from the Stroessner dictatorship, takes power at the same time protests have been prohibited. Social activists announced more mobilizations to fight for their social and political rights, obtained just 30 years ago at the end of the dictatorship in 1989.
More news in a minute, but first here's a video from our colleagues in multimedia. Welcome back. The Venezuelan Public Ministry continues to reveal more in the investigation into the failed assassination attempt against President Nicolas Maduro. So far, 14 arrests have been made and there are various international detention requests for many of those involved. We'll share more of those details in the first part of our special report.
This is where the attack against President Nicolas Maduro happened. Thwarted by the president's security escort, it left no casualties. And while now people walk safely around the zone, no one has forgotten what happened.
We were all really scared. I think all lives should be respected. We cannot play with people's lives. What happened is of great concern. The attempt needs to be thoroughly investigated so we know how to solve this issue and avoid similar attacks in the future.
Initially, the investigation led to the arrest of 2 people who were operating the drones packed with explosives. But a key piece of evidence was someone's confession. Opposition politician Juan Requesens has admitted his involvement in the assassination attempt and has directly implicated opposition leader Julio Borges as well, someone who is known for delegitimizing the Venezuelan government.
Julio Borges contacted me and asked me to help smuggle Juan Monasterios from Venezuela into Colombia.
Requesens' allies questioned the validity of his confession. But Requesens has been known for promoting violence since 2014. And in 2017, during a forum in the United States, he called for foreign intervention to overthrow the government of Nicolás Maduro. According to the public ministry, the current charges against Requesens for his involvement in the assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro are based on overwhelming evidence.
The charges against Mr. Requesens are as follows: treason, attempted homicide against the President of the Republic, attempted homicide of 7 members of the military, terrorism, criminal association, continued public harassment, and illegal possession of weapons and ammunition.
The investigation has led to the arrest of 14 suspects, among them a general in the Bolivarian National Guard who is believed to have provided essential information to those behind the attack.
The most reliable evidence we have are audios, photographs, and confession of those involved.
There are 34 suspects, and many of them are being sought abroad.
Some of them are in Colombia and some in the U.S. I want to highlight that the public minister has done its due diligence and handed all of the evidence over to Interpol so that they may detain these individuals.
This is the Atalanta cabin, located in Chinacota. These pictures were taken from the cell phones and tablets of the terrorists. We are merely showing a few of the pictures we found. The terrorists received their training with the drones they used during the assassination attempt in this cabin.
Neither the United States nor Colombia have condemned this assassination attempt. Nonetheless, the public can clearly see that people working from both countries have admitted to being part of this heinous attack.
The Ecuadorian former president, Rafael Correa, is being accused of fresh charges, now by the Comptroller's Office. The Comptroller's Office has accused the former president and other officials of financial irregularities during his administration in 2016. However, Correa's attorneys have said that these accusations have legal loopholes and that they are part of the political persecution of the leftist leader. And in Argentina, the judiciary has rejected a legal challenge filed by the former president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, linked to a corruption case. The federal judge, Claudio Bonadillo, is leading the investigation on a bribery network that allegedly took place during Fernández de Kirchner's term. So far, 12 officials have been arrested. Some say this is a new case of political persecution against a progressive Latin American leader, as is occurring in Brazil and Ecuador with their former presidents. And there are plans for Argentina and the United States to strengthen defense cooperation. Both countries' defense ministers gave a commitment to do so at a media conference earlier today. And while they did not announce any specific agreements, both said they hope for better relations between their two countries. A commitment was also given to renewed cooperation on disaster relief operations and the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations is mediating fresh talks between Honduras's government and the opposition. It's an attempt to overcome the political crises the country has faced since November's general election. The opposition has accused the president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, of electoral fraud.
If an international mediator comes here and tells us that Juan Orlando is the president, we are going to accept it. But if they tell us that he's not and that it should be Salvador Nasralla, then we need to hand the presidency to Salvador Nasralla.
In the face of the serious crisis that Honduras is going through, it is necessary to force the dictator who usurps the functions of president to resign immediately and call for free and transparent elections to rebuild the rule of law.
The minimum wage in St. Kitts and Nevis is under review. Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris said they are currently meeting with stakeholders to discuss the matter. The current rate stands at $9 an hour based on a 40-hour work week. The minimum wage was last changed in November 2014. And there will be no more cuts to state funding for public higher education institution. So says Mexico's president-elect, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He gave the assurance when he met with the heads of the country's major universities. On December 1st, López Obrador is expected to sign an agreement to improve the quality of education in the country. During his campaign, he proposed free and compulsory education for all Mexicans. New evidence will be revealed in the corruption scandal that has rocked Peru's judicial system. Now, even the country's soccer federation has been implicated.
Among those linked to Supreme Judge Cesar Hinostroza, who is being investigated for running a corruption network, is Edwin Oviedo, the president of the Peruvian Soccer Federation.
When will you deliver the tickets?
I will find out tomorrow and I will tell you how it goes.
It has to be before.
Of course, don't worry.
Okay, good.
A conversation that would have otherwise been of little consequence if Oviedo had not recently been granted favorable judicial resolutions in both cases where he is accused of crimes in his sugar company in Tuman, in the north of Peru.
This is an organized crime group. Let's remember that Mr. Oviedo, before the audios were discovered, he had a public prosecutor's accusation and he is being prosecuted for being the perpetrator of the homicide. We are before a delicate topic that has consequences and the rights violations of hundreds of workers of the Tuman company.
According to analysts, Oviedo had found, by way of the Peruvian soccer team, a platform to access to different political and judicial institutions.
The soccer team has become a national heritage, as important as food, as important as Machu Picchu. Today I have heard journalists, I heard Nicolás Lucar, a Peruvian journalist, talking about how we are coming back after the World Cup. Because he said it in the World Cup, after this win, we have to go back to a national reality, where they have to judge Oviedo for the assassinations.
Meanwhile, an independent journalist platform announced that they are currently investigating another 60,000 wiretapping incidents, quote, legally authorized, unquote, for members of the justice system, and more will be revealed on this matter.
Time now for another break, but we'll have more news after this short video from our multimedia colleagues. Welcome back. 3 children are among the 39 killed in the collapse of the motorway bridge in Genoa, Italy. The bridge gave way on Tuesday during torrential rain. Rescue teams are still searching for people who may be trapped among the rubble. The bridge operator Autostrade has come under fire from the Italian government, who say the company should be fined and it should lose its license. And Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has declared a state of emergency covering the region around Genoa. Conte said the tragedy was unacceptable in a modern society. And a Peruvian national, Carlos Jesus Eraso Trujillo, was also among the victims of the bridge collapse. Eraso's aunt, Anna, spoke with journalists on Wednesday. She told them how the family found out about the tragedy after hearing about it and how much they hoped that he would be found alive. Teachers have taken part in a strike in New Zealand. More on that and some other news from around the world.
Teachers in New Zealand went on strike for the first time in 20 years to demand higher salaries from the Labour government. Nearly 30,000 primary school teachers walked out of classes. They are disgruntled at the fact that the coalition government has failed to deliver on its promises of increased funding for social services. Migrants on board the rescue ship Aquarius in the Mediterranean Sea have recounted stories of slave trade in Libya, torture, forced labor, and sexual violence. Doctors Without Borders said in Berlin. There are 141 people on board, and MSF confirmed that almost 70 are minors, some of whom are unaccompanied.
We have also seen scars on arms and backs. People report of beatings, especially in Libya. I will talk about individual cases in a moment. There are stories of abuse, torture, forced labor, and slavery, sexual violence, including rape, and of extortion.
Residents in Bahrain took to the streets once again to denounce the monarchical government and called for its downfall. The march took place in Bilad al-Qadim on Wednesday. Popular uprisings against the government have been ongoing since 2011, and protests have been met with arrests, blockades, and brutality. Some high-profile activists such as Hassan Mushaima remain imprisoned.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisio English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you for watching.